Welcome to New Money. I am Tracy Chang. Although wine consumption has experienced explosive growth in China in recent years, most consumers are still concentrated in China's mega first-tier cities. But thanks to a few companies that help China's wine consumers become more knowledgeable, the wine consumer demographics have also started to change.
Ma Xintu is the director of City Cellar, a company that provides wine tasting events with top-quality wines to enthusiasts in Beijing and a distribution service to wine shops around the capital. Ma Xintu himself is especially fond of a wine made in China's northwestern Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region.
One important reason why we chose Xiangdu is because of our love for domestically made wine. At the same time, it's also out of respect for the care of its founder, who has made wine in the Xinjiang desert for decades. Even more importantly, the vineyards are in an amazing, beautiful natural environment with great growing conditions. Add to this a very professional team, and the wine that they produce reaches a very high level, whether it's in terms of quality or technical skill, which gives it a great taste.
Li Ruiqin is the chairwoman of Xinjiang Shangdu Winery. Now 70 years old, she began her journey with wine 20 years ago in a remote Yanqi-Hui Autonomous Region in northwest China. With generous help from the local government and 40,000 mu of land in the Gobi Desert, she led her team to build a vineyard, making use of the region's unique natural resources and conditions. Wines. Li Ruiqin is far from the only person to have opened up new land in China. In 2015, China overtook France to become the nation with the second largest vineyard area, after Spain. However, as Li Ruiqin explains, producing good wine is about more than just planting lots of vines.
We started out with a dream of, through our own hard work, making the Gobi a home to fine wine. Just because you want to make grape wine doesn't necessarily mean you'll succeed very quickly. So my goal is to build a Chinese brand over 3 generations.
During her time establishing Shangdu, Li Ruiqin has repeatedly visited famous vineyards in France and other European countries, and invited famous winemakers to train her team. The climate of the desert in Xinjiang is windy, sandy, provides ample sunlight, and barely any rainfall. This is unlike coastal wine-producing regions such as Bordeaux and Napa, which have a wet climate, less sunlight, and abundant rainfall. The conditions in Xinjiang help produce grapes high in sugar and acidity, and keep the risk of disease and pests low. All of this makes it the perfect place to grow organic grapes.
We separate them by the age of the vines. A vine that is 3, 5, 10 or 15 years old will be different. The older the vine, the more nutrition it has absorbed. Second, we separate by species. The flavor, fragrance and taste of the wine are results of the type of grape that is used.
Wang Zuming is the General Secretary of the Grape Wine Division of the China Alcoholic Drinks Industry Association. As one of the leading experts on the wine industry in China, he has followed Shangdu for a long time and gives high marks to their products.
They were the first wine producer in southern Xinjiang. Their advantages were that, in those conditions, the grapes are very rarely attacked by disease or pests. So from a different perspective, such as in terms of organic foods, they had an advantage over many regions in China and abroad.
Shangdu currently possesses a processing line that can handle 10,000 tons of grapes and a 3,000 square meter wine cellar. Their products, such as the Shangdu Antony line, account for over 70% of the high-end market in Xinjiang, and the company sells its products in many other big cities in China, including Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou.
Before we begin today's discussion, let me first introduce to you our studio guest for today's show, Mr. Andy Mok. He is the CEO of Red Pagoda Resources. Thank you so much for being here, Andy. Wine culture has just formed in China in recent years. You see more and more people talk about wine, start drinking wine. But for my parents' generation, right, they still think wine is something more exotic, more Western, it's not really a Chinese thing. But that's not really true, right? China has a very mature wine production industry.
Well, it does, Tracy, and you're absolutely right that there's a lot of attention given to the wine industry and the consumption of wine in China today. But actually, in terms of how mature wine production is in China, according to a University of Pennsylvania anthropologist, China was actually the first place to produce wine.
Wow.
9,000 years ago, 7,000 BC.
years ago.
Yes.
Wow.
So that's, I think, the first point about
I thought the
wine.
Earth was only around for 6,000 years.
Yes, that's right. That's right. I mean, a few thousand, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Totally.
So, but no, chemically tested that wine consumption or production was discovered 9,000 years ago in Henan.
Wow.
So China, in fact, was the first place to produce and consume wine. But let's fast forward and then look at contemporary China, so post-78. One of the earliest joint ventures in China was actually with Remy Martin in Tianjin to produce wine. And of course, at that time, very, very small production, relatively small production capabilities, and really not targeting so much the China market. And we know now, of course, how that's changed in that wine consumption and production and wine imports in China is really just off the charts.
That's right. But from the video, they talk about how Xinjiang is a wine producing location. Many people don't think of that.
Yes.
We know that Xinjiang has a lot of grapes, but we don't really associate a region with wine production. But tell us about it. How mature is it?
Well, I think Xinjiang has really taken off as a wine production place in China, exactly as you said. I think partly because of the climate, partly because they do have grapes, and you can't have wine without grapes. But a lot of resources have also been devoted not just to the growing of grapes, which is a precursor to wine, but also developing the expertise, investing in all of the equipment as well. So it really has developed quite a lot these past few years, Tracy.
But it seems like in recent century, at least for the past, like 60 years or so, China is not the top producer, nor is the top consumer of wine in the world. Can you brief us on the history of wine production in China? Where did we exactly drop off?
Well, I think, as we all know, anyone that knows anything about China, that traditionally baijiu and even huangjiu have been the drinks of choice, and of course beer. And in modern China, wine, I think, started taking off with economic reform and opening, where people that were looking for a more sophisticated alcoholic beverage experience and also looking for a status product, that really drove interest in and demand for mostly high-end French wine. And that's where it all started. And I think as we're seeing incomes rising, the shift towards more of a consumer-driven economy in China, as people learn more about different types of beverages and foods, that wine is growing, driven by those larger trends.
And people have started to learn about the anti-aging effects and health benefits of consuming red wine as well. It's really on an explosion of growth for the past decade or so. But like you mentioned, China uses baijiu as the primary, alcoholic beverage choice, right? But I guess people are still learning about the differences between wine and spirit. But a lot of Chinese, not first-tier or second-tier people, tier city people, but a lot of people from the countryside of China still see wine as somewhat intimidating because they're not familiar with it. They'll probably drink baijiu, but when it comes to wine, they have no idea, right?
Right, and I think this is a great point, Tracy, that wine has been, I think, both deliberately as well as, I think, as a function of China's economic and I guess societal development, positioned as, 高大上, right? As a very high-end, expensive, exclusive type of product and experience. But there are companies working to change that and maybe adopt more of a European mindset, where of course you do have your very expensive wine that maybe is for special occasions, but wine is also a part of your daily life.
That's right. Now that way you can really expand the consumer base and make more Chinese people drink more wine, right? All right. In addition to being the world's largest alcohol market, China is also the biggest global consumer of wine. But how can we widen China's wine consumer base? Welcome back. Now let's look at a foreign company that helps Chinese consumers get more comfortable with wine drinking.
Wang Mengshuan and Zhao Fengsheng have opened a Cheers branch store in the Sanlitun area in Beijing. They made the decision to open the store after first becoming true wine enthusiasts at a separate Cheers store. Zhao Fengsheng explains what drew him to the company.
I chose Cheers because of their culture and philosophy. They bring people happiness, and all of their members love wine with all their heart. The Sanlitun area has a lot of young people who are very receptive to Western culture, and Cheers provides high-quality products at a reasonable price.
Cheers was established by a member of the Masuga family, which has been involved in wine for 4 generations already. In 1898, Lena drove a car loaded with wine barrels from Switzerland and across the Alps to Italy to buy wine. She was the first woman in Switzerland to drive a car. Today, Claudia, a member of the family's new generation, is bringing wine all the way to China.
I had 2 suitcases full of wine samples, and I came to China to look forward to bring really good, outstanding and my favorite wines to the Chinese market. We have set up the first Cheers store in 2011. So the idea was to make wine drinking fun and affordable. And we bring the best price value wines to the market. Now the wine consumption is growing a lot through the millenniums, through the young generation. And it's amazing when I also see how our customers have developed their taste and now really becoming wine lovers and very sophisticated. So the market is growing amazingly, and the youngsters are very interested to know more about wine.
Cheers is targeting the middle market in China, a market segment whose growth is driven by several factors, including increasing spending power among the middle class and a change in how wine is consumed, from status symbol to a product to be enjoyed. Claudia, however, is more concerned with the joys that a glass of wine can bring to people's daily lives. Ma Lina began working at Cheers early on, and her capabilities as a manager helped her rise all the way to district manager. However, recently, she made a big decision. Encouraged by Claudia, she chose to open a Cheers branch store of her own. She describes her journey at Cheers.
Cheers has a lot of vitality, and many aspects of wine culture really drew me towards it. I was a wine enthusiast to begin with, so after a while I decided to turn this hobby into a profession. Last year I worked as a regional manager, where my job was to manage branch stores. After half a year, I felt that the time was right, and I decided to open my own branch store.
While most Chinese executives would balk at the idea of letting a talented manager go, Claudia wants to bring a certain culture to China, where everybody is allowed to develop on their own premises.
So then the next core value is learn and grow. It's very important in our company that people who work with us, they want to eagerly grow. They want to eagerly learn. To be successful in life, it means to continuously learning and do what is right and not do what is easy. Our core value number 5 is accepting being different. And Cheers has been developed to be different on the market. So I like people who think out of the box, who we are doing regularly brainstorming. How can we approach a challenge or difficulties from a different way? And that makes us constantly different. We develop a lot of entrepreneurs. So it is this spirit, this entrepreneurial spirit, this being special, going over beyond borders is what makes the Cheers culture really, really special. And I'm very, very proud of it. I'm very happy for it.
By January 2017, Cheers had opened 40 stores in 7 cities, including Beijing, Shanghai, and Chengdu. The company has planned flagship stores in Chengdu and Chongqing. In 2016, the company sold more than 500,000 bottles of wine.
So, Andy, like you said, Cheers is really helping Chinese wine consumers to adapt this European mindset when it comes to wine. It should not be something that's intimidating. It should be something that everyone can enjoy. It should be a staple on your dinner table, you name it, right? Even for social events and all of that. And so tell us about Cheers and what's its history in China?
Well, I think, what Cheers has done is positioned itself really as providing an experience, which wine is the way to have that experience. And looking, as you're saying, Tracy, to make it really mass market accessible. And I think one of the very smart things that they've done is they make free tastings available for anyone at any time. So it's very welcoming. You can come in, no pressure, try wine. And the first step, I think, to becoming educated is just trying it out and seeing what you think.
Right. So, they invite people in to try wine for free, so you're more likely to feel more comfortable. You don't feel as intimidated, or you basically have someone to guide you through the entire wine consumption process. And the founder of Cheers, Claudia, I actually met her, and I've been into a Cheers store. It is a remarkable story, and being European and coming to China, believe in this market so much, and then want to invest a lot of time and money. And I guess the company has expanded pretty successfully for the past few years. But what does Cheers' success say about China's wine drinkers and our consuming habit?
Well, I think it says, Tracy, that, really this is, in some sense, the golden age of consumption, and in particular wine consumption in China. And I think what makes a company like Cheers very well positioned to benefit from this is right person, right product, and right time. And that, as we saw, Claudia is someone with a very deep wine background. So, she has the expertise, has the passion. The product meaning not just the wine, but the whole experience of going to a store, having it be very friendly, very approachable, is really the product, if you will. And then the time is, we've seen China's wine market taking off. So it is creating opportunities not just in the Tier 1 cities, but even the Tier 2, Tier 3,
I know
Tier
Cheers
4
has moved
cities.
into all those cities as well. It's got lots of stores in Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities right now.
Yes.
So,
and an important enabler too, Tracy, I think, just to jump in quickly, is that e-commerce as well. So it's not just the Tier 2, Tier 3 cities, but you could be, in a rural place in China and still be able to try a very accessible, inexpensive wine.
do people actually see wine as a dinner table staple, or not yet?
Well, not yet, not yet, because while there are, we're in Beijing and you go to Shanghai, other Tier 1 cities, it is very much a part of many white-collar Chinese people's lives, but that's only a very small proportion of the Chinese population. So I think this is, in a sense, a white space for companies looking to sell wine in China.
It's a pity that it's not a part of everyday routine, because when I studied and worked in France, people served it at lunch. And if there's any occasion on Friday afternoons, your boss will bring a bottle of wine and just share with your team. That was wonderful. We should do that here.
We should.
People should really adopt wine drinking as part of the daily routine. It makes you happier, and there are lots of health benefits. And I guess as more companies like Cheers spring up, people will learn that it's not something exotic. It can be enjoyed by everyone, no matter what your income level is, at moderate amounts, of course. And you should still be able to go back to work. But that's a very pleasant trend that we're seeing here in China.
Yeah.
Now, time for another break. We'll look at China's wine market potential when we come back. Welcome back. So what are China's typical wine drinkers look like? Let's find out.
As the Chinese economy develops, so do several aspects of its society, including people's drinking habits. People born after the reform and opening up policy have drinking habits that set them clearly apart from their parents. The post-80s generation is slowly becoming the mainstream, and its members tend to prefer grape wine to the more challenging traditional rice wine, baijiu. The gunbei style of drinking, where full glasses are downed in one go, is being replaced by a more casual drinking culture, better suited for grape wines. If this trend keeps up, then the majority of the baijiu market will be taken over by grape wine. Grape wine has already expanded from its initial market in first-tier cities, such as Beijing and Shanghai, into third-tier cities. In coastal provinces such as Zhejiang and Fujian, wine has already entered the village-level market. Knowledge about wine is also on the rise, and it is no longer as mystical and lofty as it used to be. It's reasonable to assume that in a few years' time, most people will have a much closer relationship to the drink.
All of the main wine-producing countries sell their products in China, and this does put a lot of pressure on the domestic wine industry. However, it also serves as a very good motivation because the market here still has massive potential. If we can use the next few years to improve the quality of our own products and promote them to the Chinese consumers, then I believe that both imported and domestically made wine both can develop in a positive direction. So the overall development and prospects are looking very good.
Chengdu faces competition from other major domestic brands, such as Changyu and Great Wall. Li Weichin explains that while the company is upping their e-commerce game, they also hope to use their grapes to open new streams of revenue.
Our business and sales models are both centered on wine, but our focus isn't really on the wine, it's on the industry. Since we started planting grapes in '97, we've also produced face masks using grape extracts. Everybody knows that wine contains things that are good for the body, such as OPCs and resveratrol. Everybody says that it can soften the veins in the heart and brain, which is the work of resveratrol. We want to be a good company that helps improve the economy in the Gobi and provides safe food products. We want all our products to be healthy in every way. Now that we have reached a certain scale, we are probably the biggest company of our type in China.
At Cheers, Claudia's father tests and guarantees the quality of every wine in Switzerland before they export it to China. The company is also working to educate more enthusiasts that will open new branch stores and spread the wine culture across China.
The Cheers' ultimate goal is to build up 888 stores all around China and then start expanding it to other countries. So right now we are growing with a very committed franchise concept. That means our employees, our customers, whoever likes can open a Cheers store in their hometown and create this part of culture which we have created here in Beijing, bring it also to other parts in China.
The Chinese wine market is bound to keep growing, and there are huge opportunities to be had in the import sector. However, as China is sure to climb from its current ranking as the 5th biggest consumer of wine, opportunities will be plentiful for domestic producers as well.
Andy, I guess I talked about in first-tier cities there are a lot of young people. For example, I drink wine all the time if I can. But what does a Chinese typical wine drinkers look like?
Well, I would say, Tracy, that I think that if there were a typical wine drinker in China, that the bullseye of this market would be young people, say in their 20s to 30s, white-collar professionals making, maybe 5,000 and up RMB per month.
Yeah.
But I think that we would be surprised, too, to look at how prevalent wine drinking is. And part of that is a supply-side phenomenon, in that now go to any supermarket and there's a wine section. And there's wine not just from where you would expect, like France and Italy, but also places like New Zealand, Chile, and that more and more, when things are more available, more people will try them. So I think that the wine market really is a mass market phenomenon, but the heart of the market is, as you said, young people with disposable income and a willingness to try new things.
And you know what's really interesting? Before, people think of wine, oh, I only want wine from Italy, or I only want wine from France. But these days, Chinese consumers are open to California wine, Australian wine, even from South America, Chile,
right. South Africa
yeah. as well. So people are broadening their base, and they're consuming more local wine. And China has Zhangyu and Changcheng. These are two great brands that has really rich and wealthy history. And we know that at China state dinners, we all serve China domestically produced wine. So needless to say, we've got 1.3 billion people, and there are a lot of young people with a lot of consumption power. That's got to be a huge market with lots of potential.
Yeah, well, it is, Tracy, of course, but I think what's also very interesting is the global potential for Chinese wines. And just as back in the 70s, French wines were the wines that mattered, and in the Judgment of Paris in 1976, where there was a blind wine tasting, California wines won.
Wow.
And that was an earth-shaking event in the wine world. It said California wines were just as good, if not better, than French ones. And something similar happened in China in 2011. So this is the judgment of Beijing, perhaps, where Xinjiang is a very important wine production area, but actually Ningxia produces some very high-quality wines. And in a head-to-head matchup of 5 wines from Ningxia versus 5 from Bordeaux, in a blind taste test, 4 of the 5 winners were from Ningxia.
Amazing.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, I think that just shows how far places like Xinjiang and Ningxia have come in the ability to produce wine. But, you know, that's not all it takes. So, because wine is also, in some sense, also a Veblen product where people do want to buy something that they feel makes them feel special, gives them status. And we're not there yet with Chinese wine.
So exactly, to enjoy good wine, you don't need to slap a Lafite label on it and sell it for $10,000 a bottle. That's what Gloria said, and this is her one of the biggest reasons why she wanted to come to China, because she feels like Chinese consumers are sometimes being taken advantage of. So a lot of us badly need a lot of education. How can you better educate Chinese wine consumers?
Well, that's a great question, Tracy. And I think this is one of the great things about wine is that it's so accessible in that at one level, education is just, do you like it? And this is where I think a company like Cheers is very helpful in China, because what it does is it helps consumers develop the confidence to say, you know what, I don't need to be a wine expert. I just try it, I like it, and that's fine. But for people that are interested maybe in going deeper, or maybe even the more technical aspects of wine, like how does this grape compare to another grape? You know, how does the wine produced in Bordeaux compared to Napa Valley? You know, what are those differences? And you can go as deep as you'd like. And that's what I think wine plays a big part in Chinese consumer culture as part of this rebalancing of China's economy to encouraging consumption, but also greater personal fulfillment as well, because just enjoying and learning about wine can be a very fun experience.
And it's great to know that China's got a couple locations that really produce top-notch wine. Perhaps there's a lot of tourism opportunities down there as well. You can visit winery like you do a wine tour like you do in the United States, and you can even make wine yourself. So that's something a lot of Chinese consumers and wine drinkers can look forward to. Thank you so much for being here today, Andy.
Thank you.
Red wine consumption in the world's second largest economy nearly tripled between 2007 and 2013. But on a per capita basis, Chinese consumers still trails French wine drinkers by a sizable margin. Needless to say, China's wine market still has much potential to grow. Well, thank you so much for watching today's show. We'll see you at the same time next week. Bye for now.